Boundaries. That's a tough one that we all struggle with. Whether it's we set them too much or we set them too little, boundaries is just something that seems to continue throughout our entire lives, and it's something we're constantly struggling with. So I'm going to give you both perspectives. The side where you're not setting them enough, the side where you're setting them too much. So me personally, I have always struggled with boundaries. I've always bounced from going too little to too much to too little to too much. I just bounced all the way to the extremes. Finding that middle ground has always been difficult. But there is one thing that I've learned through my degree in psychology, through just life experience. People are animals. And I mean that in the funny way that they're just animals and they do crazy stuff. But also, people are animals in the sense that if something works, their brain is programmed to continue doing that thing. If their life gets easier from a certain result, they will continue doing that thing because it's making their life easier. So when it comes to getting things from people, if we make it really easy for other people to get things from us that we're not necessarily willing to share, but we just don't have any boundaries set in place, people will come along and take it. And that's been true since the beginning of time, when it was leaving our resources in a pile in the middle of a cave and coming back and it was all gone, to today when your friend stayed up all night last night partying and has work or homework or something to do or something to buy for their significant other, and they just didn't get around to it, so they try to pawn it on off to you. Now, sometimes helping other people out with things is good, but if it becomes a problem and it continues happening, it can really cause some problems in our lives. I mean, it has for me many different times. So I think the first big part of just setting those boundaries when you don't have enough is really describing to yourself, doesn't have to be someone else right away, but what are the things you're comfortable doing and what are the things you aren't comfortable doing. And sometimes those things are going to come up to you right on the top of your head as you're thinking about this conversation with yourself, as you're having this conversation with yourself. Sometimes they're not going to come up until something happens, and then you're going to be like, oh, I felt that. There was a feeling in my chest. Some boundary was just crossed. I could feel it. I didn't verbalize the boundary, but something about this didn't feel right. And that's something that we all have to kind of continuously check in with ourselves about. Setting boundaries requires a significant amount of emotional intelligence, something we all possess, but maybe we don't use every day. And so having that conversation with ourselves of, how did this thing feel for me? This thing that just happened to me. Would I want it to happen again? Am I okay with it happening again? And it's like not a big deal? Or does this bother me? And starting to set up the boundaries of, okay, when this person does this, or when I do this to myself, it's not okay. The difficult part is having the conversations with the other people. Because one thing that's difficult about setting boundaries is when you teach someone, when you teach an animal that they can treat you a certain way over and over and over again, they will continue doing it. And when you change it, they get upset. And a good example is, I don't know if any of you have a dog or a cat or an animal, and let's say every time that you cook food or open the fridge, you give your animal a little piece of something. Now, after a while, your animals are going to start waiting by the fridge. And if you open up the fridge door, close the fridge door, and don't do anything, your animal, the not completely sentient animal that it is going to look at you confused and wonder, where's my food? Why didn't I get it? Same things happens with humans. If you open the fridge and you give someone food every single time, if you open the fridge and don't give them food, they're going to get upset. So setting those boundaries can be a bit difficult because they're used to you giving them food every time you open the fridge. So it's something you're going to have to slowly enact. Or you could abrasively just enact it right away and say, this makes me feel uncomfortable and I'm not interested in continuing doing this, or any other iteration of that verbiage. But I will admit, that's the hard part. And then there's those of us who set boundaries too much. Well, that's a whole different beast entirely. Sometimes we'll set boundaries, so many boundaries, just to control other people and to have every peg in its spot, every little piece of thing squared away, so that we can just kind of have control over our environment. And it comes to the point where it starts to affect our friends and family. And sometimes backing out of that is difficult because we're looking at all these boundaries that we've set, and it feels as though those boundaries are really helping us. So we don't necessarily want to take them down, even though taking some boundaries down would benefit not only the people around us, but ourselves as well. We'll have cleaner, more beautiful connections. So when it comes to when you do set a boundary, try to look at the reasoning for that boundary. Are you doing that? Are you setting that boundary just because someone's annoying you, or are you setting that boundary because genuinely your life would be better without this thing? It's an interesting kind of ebb and flow of, we are humans and we should be helping each other out, but we're also entitled to our own opinions and what we do and do not want to do, and our own individuality. So I do implore you, as you are going throughout your daily lives, take a second to think, this thing that just happened, is this something I should set a boundary on? Is this something I should take a boundary away on? Humans are constantly evolving creatures, and to not constantly evolve our boundaries is to stop growing. So, but if you didn't know, I am in Peru right now. That's what all this background is. And if you're interested in seeing more of this and more of this, I'm going to have a video right here that YouTube thinks is perfect for you. Otherwise, I'm going to set a boundary right now, and that everyone that watches this video has to subscribe. That's totally not manipulation. That's just marketing. So, no, but if you are interested in seeing more of my videos and you want to stay in touch, I have a little bubble right here. If you click on that, you can subscribe and we can keep in touch. If you are struggling with any boundary setting stuff, drop it in the comments. Happy to talk. See you soon.